Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books Everyone Should Read. We're on episode 5 and we are reviewing a Western, Riders of the Purple Sage by Zane Grey. And this is my first Western I've ever read. I have watched a couple Western movies. I watched Tombstone and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's not really my genre, but it's got a lot of things that I do like about it. So let's review this book. First, the plot. So this starts out with three main characters. We have Lassiter, who is a gunman, who shows up, kind of a stranger out of the blue, into this little town, and he is known for killing Mormons. And we will get back to the Mormon issue in a second. Then we have Jane, who is a Mormon woman who is being pressured to marry somebody in her town whom she does not want to marry. And finally, we have Ventures, who is a man who is one of the hired help from Jane, and he proclaims that he is in love with Jane and refuses to abandon her as a bunch of things start happening in town to try and pressure Jane to make this marriage that she's not interested in. And over the course of the book, what we have is Jane being continuously oppressed, we'll say, in heavier and heavier terms. Thefts happen, and people start abandoning her that she thought she could trust, things like that, in order to pressure her to marry this man. And Ventures ends up leaving her to go try and figure out where some of her stolen property is, and goes through a bunch of adventures, such as shooting somebody who he finds out is not who he thought he had shot, and he has to save this person. And Lassiter sticks around with Jane, and he is on his own little quest to try and get revenge for something that happened with his sister. So they kind of all three tie together in the end, very much related on what ends up happening to them. And and in the end, it's not quite happily ever after, but it's not quite a tragedy either. Okay, so I did decide to include this book on my list of 1,000 books everyone should read. On Westerns, if you look up a list of best Westerns of all time, this book is pretty often on that list. It's not usually number one, but it's usually on that list and pretty high up, within the top 10. And during the first 2/3 of the book, I would say, I was kind of scratching my head at why. I mean, it was not super engaging. I put it down and kind of be like, I should get back to that. But oh, look, shiny, something over there, kind of attitude of getting back to reading it. And I'll talk about the characters in a minute, but they weren't super like, wow, I really love these characters. The writing style, wasn't, it wasn't easy, I'll put it that way. Not that it was bad, just wasn't always easy. And so for a while there, I was kind of teetering on the verge of, well, maybe it should be on my list, but maybe it's just okay. Well, the final third of the book, final fourth maybe, totally blew it out of the water. It was much better. It made up for the first 2/3. So yes, it is being included on my list. Okay, so let's talk about the Mormonism issue. So I am not Mormon and don't have particularly, love for the religion. And so the fact that Mormons, and not just Mormons, it's not just Mormons are the bad guys, it's Mormonism is the bad guy too. The whole, church process, there's a lot of that going on here. So they're depicted as, with kind of an irony going on here, doing evil things in the name of God, kind of going on. And, totally straight-faced thinking, well, my church leader has told me to murder, steal, do other evil things. But my church leader told me, therefore I'm doing it for God. There's that irony going on there. And because of that, somebody who's watching this that may read the book, if you're Mormon or pro-Mormon or something like that, you may be kind of offended at that. So I wanted to bring that up because it is there. Now, I don't think it's unrealistic, because obviously there's plenty of examples in history of a religious leader using their position of power to be corrupt. But I am a Christian, and I kind of put myself in this position and saying, if my particular brand of Christianity was depicted like this, would I be offended? And I think I would. So, because it is very black and white. Like there's no Mormon man that's really written in a positive light. It's kind of like you're all either evil or, following evil. And the women are not depicted as evil, but they are depicted as brainwashed. Totally 100%, including Jane. So that's one of the things about this book that's kind of interesting. So Jane, our main female character for most of the book, is not particularly likable. And one of those aspects is that she's kind of brainwashed about it. I mean, she's got example after example after example of how men in her church are treating her badly and women in her church are treating her badly. And yet she will not abandon anything about it for a long time. Like she will not believe that they could do this to her. That's one of the things I didn't like about this book. Not just Jane, but that kind of oppression that's, heavy over the first 2/3 of the book. There's, first her cattle is stolen, and then the deeds to her property are stolen, and then her horses are stolen. And throughout all of this happening, she's losing everything to these people that are obviously the people of her church. And she won't turn her back on, and not just her religion, because, somebody's religion versus the people in the religion, those are two separate things, right? It's not that she wouldn't turn her back on a religion that was irritating. It was that she wouldn't believe what her eyes are telling her, that these people were doing this to her. So that kind of got a little bit like, good grief, lady, get over it. But anyway, that was there. So dealing with Mormonism, if you're, like I said, if you're pro-Mormonism, this book might be offensive because of the way it's depicted. So there's no really humor in this book, although there was one moment of humor, at least to me. This was one of those irony things. So when I talk about the women being brainwashed, so one of the women came up to Jane basically and said, you should marry the man, because, we marry men that we don't really love and pop out babies because of our eternal rewards, because this will give us eternal rewards. And I don't know if the author intended that to be ironic or not, because the eternal reward of a Mormon woman is that they are stuck with the man they married and pop out babies for the rest of eternity. So I thought that was funny, but that's just me. Anyway, so going back on to what I didn't like about this book, we'll focus on that for a second. So again, coming back to Jane. So I've already told you that she's kind of brainwashed. Well, she's also got a couple other unappealing characteristics, one of which is she is vain. The book flat out says she goes past a mirror, and every time she does, she must look into it and admire herself. And I'm just like, oh, wow. That's kind of, okay then. Another thing about her is she is very manipulative. So Jane, Lassiter stays with her. So he is one of the two main characters, the gunslinger, supposed to be a fantastic shot. And he stays with her, and she is trying to get him to not kill other people in her town, other Mormons. And that's an admirable goal, to not murder people, that's a good thing. But she goes about it in as much manipulation as she can. So she ends up telling him, I love you. But you get the impression not that she loves him, but that she's trying to get him to do what she wants. So it's always Lassiter, I love you, do this thing. Lassiter, I love you, don't do this thing, okay? It's not a case of I love you regardless or I want what's best for you. It's more of let me manipulate you. If I love you, you will do what I want. So again, she does not come across in a positive light in this. And this is not to say she's exclusively, horrible. She has a lot of good characteristics too. So she's generous. You can tell she really cares about other people. She takes in an orphan and her mom that's dying to try and care for them. I mean, she does some good things too, so it's not exclusively bad. But overall, I kind of didn't like her character. Something else that I didn't really love about this book, or it maybe neutrally, but didn't love, was the writing style. So this book is in the public domain, and I will link below to the Gutenberg Project for the public domain version of Riders of the Purple Sage. It was written I think it was published in 1912, so quite old for a book. And so some of the language, it just has that older flavor to it. Some things that, you're like, I don't think that word means that today. I would notice a handful of words, bravado, for example, that today we would tend to think of as bravery, but it's not backed up by anything. But here it's written more like it is backed up by something, like he is brave because he has something backing him up. So things like that. It's a couple words that don't mesh with our current vocabulary quite right, or they're just very, using, I don't know, $4 words instead of 50-cent words kind of things, whereas our modern language is probably dumbed down a little bit, and I'm just used to that. It also has the added complication in that you have an accent, a Western accent going on. For example, and is written that way. For example, horse. If somebody's speaking, it would be spelled H-O-S-S. Or the word maybe, if somebody is speaking, it would be M-E-B-B-E, maybe. So things like that. So they have a lot of accent thing going on. And finally, there are, I'm not a horse person or a ranch person. I don't know some of these terms. So sometimes you'll have some terms on there that I'm like, is this like an idiom that I'm just not familiar with because it's dealing with horses and ranching and stuff like that? So it made for slower reading. Because I sometimes have to read something and then reread it kind of going, what exactly did that mean? Get it in context, So the language itself can be harder than a modern book. So that's something that I wouldn't say I disliked, but it's just something to bring up as far as it may not be something for you. Another thing would be, animal cruelty. So it's not flat out having animal cruelty that's going on, but there are some points of indifferent cruelty. So horses die in this. They just do. For various reasons, and some of which is, you ride a horse until it dies, basically. That kind of thing. And there was no, nobody cared. It wasn't a case of, oh no, my horse died. It was kind of like, bummer, my horse died. Okay, let's move on. And so some people might find that not so exciting. Okay, so those are some of the things that I didn't like about the book. Things that I did like about the book would basically be in the last third or fourth of the book, that when the action really picked up and the twists came out. So it has everything you expect for a action cowboy. You have the horse racing and the shootouts and the trying to outwit the opponent out in the wild sagebrush, that kind of stuff. And it was very engaging. Like, I put it down and was like, oh, I really want to get back to that. I want to find out what happens. So that part of the book, it really did. It was very engaging. It was that, you really wanted to know what was happening. It also had those twists in the plot. So who is related to whom and why, and the twist of how you defeat the bad guys isn't always obvious. So some of those things I mean, I liked that. It was, like I said, it was very, it very much kept your attention. And that the writer did a great job. I would also say, let's see, on my notes, that I felt that this was a good introduction to the Western genre. An old book, definitely. And if I do another Western, which I will, I'll do something that's written more modern for my next one at some point in the future to get kind of more of a well-rounded experience. But for something that's considered a classic Western book, I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I don't know that I'd go out of my way to read another one by this author because this is considered his best book, I think. And, I just didn't love it that much. But I did love I loved it enough to say that I'd be more interested in reading Western books, just not necessarily him. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about, I got a restored edition. Now, I had no idea, but the original book was written in, like I said, 1912. And then this book was written in 2005. So this is much more recent. If you have read Riders of the Purple Sage before, you probably read the original, not this one. But the restored edition, the author, apparently he wrote manuscript, submitted it, and the editors kept rejecting it, and finally somebody got it and did a bunch of edits, some of them for major points of the story. And so this is what I read the version that what the author originally intended. Now, I have not read the originally published version, and so it's kind of hard for me to compare the two, but I did do so at some very specific points. So now I'm going to say heavy spoilers ahead. I'm going to tell you how the story ended and some major twists in the story because they're different based on which version you read. The restored edition changes some things. And so I'm going to say if you haven't read it and want to read it, now would be a time to skip this segment. The next thing I'm going to do is just tell you what book I'm going to read next. So that'll be the end of this for a second. Okay, on the original version, I don't have a page number because this is just I'm reading it off my phone. So again, spoilers. This is Millie. So what happened was Lassiter's sister, Millie, had been kidnapped 18 years before the book takes place. And Lassiter's on a quest to find her, although when he gets to where she was, she's been dead for several years, or to get revenge on what happened to her. And now he's recounting here towards the end of the book what had happened to Millie. So in the 1912 version of the story, he says that she had gotten caught up in the religious teaching of a Mormon man, and her husband came out and basically was like, no, and basically ranted and raved and called the Mormon preacher names and stuff like that. And Millie was different after that. And the town basically was like, oh, is she different because she was in love with the preacher, the Mormon preacher? Was she in love with the religion? Or maybe she's pregnant. And then she is kidnapped. And the town basically says, oh, she ran away with the preacher man. And but neither Lassiter nor her husband believe that. They believe she was kidnapped. So Lassiter came back. This is now 2 years after her abduction. Says, unfortunately, I can't give you a page number because, again, it's on my phone. But quoting the book, it says, she wrote a letter and sent it to her husband. It says, She went on to say that for a time she was out of her head, and when she got right again, all that kept her alive was the baby. It was a beautiful baby. She said, and all she thought and all she dreamed was somehow to get the baby back to its father. And then she thankfully lay down and died. And the letter ended abruptly in the middle of a sentence. It wasn't signed. Okay, so what do you gather from what that said? So from everything I've told you, she was pregnant, she was kidnapped, she gave birth to a baby, she wants to get the baby back to her husband, the father. Okay, the revised, restored edition on what originally happened. So when Millie changes and the townspeople are wondering what's up with her, they wonder, is she in love with the Mormon preacher? Is she in love with the Mormon religion? They don't mention anything about pregnancy. Then the letter comes, and it says, this is on page 304, she had been bound and gagged and dragged away from her home by 3 men. She didn't send a letter from town, but outside town. She penned it in a cave where she was black and blue from beaten, and she was tied up even while her baby was being born, because it appeared that the preacher, who had of course come on the scene, was not running any risk of losing her. She went on to say that for a time she was out of her head, and even when she got it right again, all that kept her alive was her baby, a beautiful baby. And she said, and all she thought and dreamed of was somehow to get the baby back home to be with Frank, her husband, to forget forever the man with the golden beard who was the father. And the letter ended abruptly. So what you have here is 2 completely different scenarios. In the published edition from 1912, it was her husband is the father of the baby, and she has run away, and maybe she regrets it and wants to get the baby back to her husband, but, that's the end of that. In this version, the restored version, it's a lot darker. Now, it doesn't come quite out and say, but the fact that she's tied up even while giving birth paints a very dark picture of exactly how she got pregnant, right? And it's not her husband's baby. So I'll leave that to you. Now that's well written in that there's lots of implications there that the writer doesn't come out flat out and say, but it's pretty obvious what happened, right? So this gives you an idea between the 2 versions. The one that was originally published, they didn't want to be quite as outright offensive to potentially Mormon readers. But originally what he wrote was pretty stronger. So I just wanted to bring that out. If you have read or want to read the book, which version you might want to pick. I haven't read the entirety of the public domain 1912 version, so it may tighten up some of the rambling that the author had in this version that I didn't love. But according to the foreword at the beginning from the person who restored the edition, he liked Zane Grey's original writing style better than what the editors changed it to. Now, of course, having said that, he's probably looking to have the sales of this book. So, whether he's being truthful and this is actually better than the original, I don't know. But I just wanted to bring that out there, that's what's going on with the 2 different versions, one of which is different. And that difference isn't subtle. I mean, it's actually important to the story. So who is the father of this baby kind of makes a difference on the motivation on who is doing what and why. Okay, so this isn't a small change. It's actually a pretty big change. But anyway, it's up to you on what you were interested in reading. I would actually be very interested if somebody watches this video and has an opinion, like you've read both versions, to tell me which one is better, because I don't know. All right, I'm on to part 2 of this, and that would be on what I'm reading next. So this is a book that was recommended to me by a friend who has nagged me about this book for a while. They're like, this is a fantastic book. You will love it. Read it, read it, read it, read it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing this for this series. I will pick it up and read it. So it's by, is that pronounced Ilona or Ilona? I'm not sure, but I'll do Ilona Andrews. And it's called Burn for Me. Now, the person who recommended it said it was a fantasy action, but on the back of the book, it declares it is a romance. So, I'm not sure. Either one is fine. I don't care. So I'm going to read that, and we'll review it next time. Thank you for watching.